Hey everyone, in this video we'll be looking at Peopleware Chapter 3, which is called Vienna Waits for You. Vienna Waits for You, that's a bright and cheery name. I have never been to Vienna. No, I haven't. I'm confusing it with Venice, which I have been to, and it's a very lovely place. You should go, and I hope I go to Vienna someday too. We'll see if this chapter is more upbeat, than the previous ones have been. So the authors talk about something called the Spanish theory of management. And this is a term they coined, well, as far as I can tell, to comment on the idea of a fixed amount of value in the world. So, that's kind of the paradigm, the worldview. So since there's only so much value to be had in an economic sense, if you want to get rich, you have to get it out of other people. So mining gold, enslaving the natives, and getting them to do work for you, and so on. And that didn't really work out so well for them because the result was, besides the ethical and cultural legacy of that sort of behavior, basically they brought a bunch of gold home and got inflation because all of a sudden they had a lot of gold, but the same amount of, goods and services that were going around. Now, the English, on the other hand, had an idea that there was an unlimited amount of potential value and like an unlimited amount of potential value to be had, and you just had to go out and create environments where people could create that value. And if you do that, people, will do it. And so, the result for them was they had the Industrial Revolution, and the sun never set on that empire for quite some time. Fast forward to the modern era, and you can see we're all much better served thinking of developers by the English theory than the Spanish theory, right? Because if your mindset is on the Spanish boat, you're probably trying to get more hours of work for the same salary out of your people, and you think that that's how you create value. And and that's extremely ignorant and naive, but that happens at a lot of places. Truth be told, when we as developers have our efforts augmented by technology, it's to a dramatically greater extent than even guys in the Industrial Revolution, because there's essentially no upper limit to how much impact our work can have. So, and so to be more specific, contrast that with a factory worker whose productivity tops out at, say, X amount of widgets per day, or a baker who can make a certain number of loaves per day, or a barista that can make N cups of coffee per day. With software engineering, your work and my work and a given person's work could touch the customer experience of thousands or millions or even billions of people every single day. And that's a lot of value to be created. And it's our responsibility to facilitate that kind of behavior in ourselves and in the folks on our teams. Now we get to the inspiration for the title of the chapter, which talks about kind of the end of a person's journey. It's from a Billy Joel song and references the last stop on your itinerary. It's sailing off into the sunset and so on, realizing that we all only have one life and that people, regardless of how interesting and meaningful their work is, and hopefully it is, not always, but ideally it is, even if it's interesting and meaningful, people are going to be thinking about their families. They're going to be thinking about adventures that they want to take, bucket list items, making a dent in the universe, as they say, maybe having a legacy of feeling like they'll leave the world a better place than they found it, and so on, right? And people will eventually rebel against the idea of working them nonstop unless you're paying them enough to ignore the existential dread entirely. But even I think that's not sustainable over the decades. I've certainly never been paid enough to ignore my existential dread, and I think that's probably a good thing. To be honest, that's a thing you want to sit with if you want to grow as a person. But I digress. There are a couple companies actually that very famously do this in the Bay Area, meaning that they work people a lot and pay them a lot and so on. And they do that, but then they fire the person They fire people like just once they get past the peak of their careers, and it's like it's disgusting and it's mercenary. And I really like abhor this company because they're super like proud and public about that type of pattern being their MO. It's and like, I wish I could also point to them and say like this is a very unsuccessful company, but unfortunately they're actually like super successful. And well, I should say maybe people know what they're walking into when they join. Personally, I would rather not be paid twice as much and also work twice as many hours. And I think most people are like that too. But, that's just me. So, anyways, the next section is about overtime. And the authors speak out pretty strongly that human beings can't really do more than 40 hours per week of creative intellectual work. And so if someone works overtime, they're likely to do undertime also, kind of, uh, you know, during that week if they can. And if they're truly being forced into overtime all the time, they're going to rebel in some way or another, or just end up becoming workaholics. And being a workaholic isn't a sustainable lifestyle, because even if one can get their people to work overtime all the time, and some of those people are on board, eventually those people, those workaholics, are going to realize what they've sacrificed in terms of their personal life. And that person isn't going to think that there's anything he can do about the situation, since you've already established a precedent that overtime is normal or expected. So you're just going to lose him entirely. And maybe if you're that one Bay Area company, you're optimized for that, so you only get people at the brief peak of their career before they're burnt out. But most likely you're not. And, well, and even if you are, maybe you should still respect people's personal lives anyways. But and for the most part, you will lose your workaholics eventually, and it's going to be a rough scene. It's going to be a rough scene. One of one of the biggest hit, or I should say, yeah, one of the big hidden costs in running a company is replacement costs for an experienced worker. And you'd be surprised at how hard it is to hire people to then get them trained to a productive level. It's very time and resource expensive, especially, you know, for development environments. And it's largely a hidden cost too, because it's really hard to measure. What is the time value of time spent, interviewing X number of people for, N interviews? How long does it take to get the person onboarded and familiarized with the code base or whatnot? And so, I have no idea how to measure that. Neither does anyone else. But it's a lot. Like, I 100% guarantee you it's a lot. So when you've put in the time and effort to bring someone on the team, it's worth doing what you can to make their lives, good. And a person will give you a lot of value in 48 hours. Believe me, it's a lot better for everyone involved if you let them have that, rather than trying to squeeze out another 10 or 20 hours and then losing them after 6 months or a year because they just couldn't stand it. I think another thing to be aware of is that a person's productivity, at least for software engineers, grows dramatically as his familiarity with the code base increases. And that's a kind of growth in skill that you'll see happen very slowly but surely over the course of months and years. After you've been at an organization for 6 months, 1 year, 2 years, you're much faster. You know where stuff is. You are very, very familiar with the technologies involved and so on. And so you can put out a lot more, a lot faster, and a lot better quality. So, that's a big difference that you'll see like in each individual person. It's a big difference, and it's worth giving people the time to get good. So this is starting to get long, but the point the authors make at the end of the chapter is this, and I quote, "People under time pressure don't work better, they just work faster." And that's a sacrifice to quality, if you make it, that will hurt you in many ways in the long run. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you all in the next one.